Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. Since we've talked, Tommy Rees was introduced as offensive coordinator. Kevin Stefanski announced he'll go back to calling plays, and Myles Garrett made the list of finalists in his attempt to repeat as NFL Defensive Player of the Year. And a pair of compelling conference championship games are set for Sunday. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. How's it going, Chud?
Well, Scott, I'm cold. I
Yeah.
mean, it's super cold outside. I was cold on my picks last week. So it's just cold. I mean, this is, we're stuck in one of those ruts here in Cleveland where, you haven't seen grass since December and we're not going to see it till who knows, maybe February. And I mean, the kids getting all these days off of school. I mean, we are in an Arctic blast.
I know that's no good, Chud. I'm not a fan of the Arctic blast, buddy.
Yeah, I know. That's where we're at. But hey, January in Cleveland, Ohio. But I think as far as this podcast goes, the top story, and not a surprise, we both said it last week, not a shock at all. Maybe how he came out and delivered the news. Kevin Stefanski will call the plays.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We talked about it. No surprise. If it had been a different pick as coordinator, then I think there would have been more mystery, maybe a tougher decision. But Tommy Rees has not called plays in the NFL. He did in college for 4 years, three with Notre Dame, one with Alabama. So it's not like he's never done it, but this is only going to be his third season ever in the NFL. First time as a coordinator in the NFL. It just makes sense. But yeah, I think you're right. I don't know if I expected Stefanski to announce that yesterday. So I appreciate that he did. It keeps us from having to talk about it for months and ask him every time we see him. So we at least got that out of the way. Uh, but I think it's the right move. We talked about it a million times on here, Chud. I think Stefanski's a good play caller. I think he's a really smart football coach and excels on that side of the ball. And I get it; they're coming off 3-14, and he called plays early in the year. But I do think that he's the right guy for the job. And I know some people think that diminishes the job of Tommy Rees. Is it a true coordinator? I don't feel that way. I think you can coordinate the offense and have a lot of control and run the meetings and have the head coach call the plays. We see that set up plenty of times in this league.
So Reese said he's okay with it, that play calling is just part of the process of being an offensive coordinator. And he's good with it. Do you buy that? Do you think he's all right with it from listening to him say that and just in general, your thoughts?
Yes, because I think he understands the situation like I laid out, his inexperience, Stefanski's experience doing it. I'm sure a big pay raise came with the promotion to coordinator. I don't know if Tommy Rees would have been a play caller if, let's say, he'd gotten a job somewhere else. Now, if he had gotten a job with the Patriots, and I know that had been speculated about, that Mike Vrabel got the Patriots head coaching job, would bring Tommy Rees aboard as a coordinator, then he would have been a play caller because Vrabel is not, he's a defensive guy. He would not have called the plays. But it went to Josh McDaniels, who's been a coordinator forever, been a coordinator in New England multiple times, has way more experience than Rees. So I just think if you're going to be a coordinator for the first time at 32 years old, I think this is a nice ramp up where you don't have to call the plays. There's some pressure relieved. So, yeah, I'm sure Rees is confident that he could do it, but I think he's fine with Stefanski calling the plays.
Listening to him, I kind of feel like, Scott, that, maybe 10 years from now or however many years, we might look back and say, hey, Tommy Rees, he's now a head football coach and maybe one of the better ones in the league. And we look at his pedigree and, Alabama, Notre Dame, offensive coordinator of the Browns. And, he was brought up and, how like, do you know what I mean? Like sometimes in
Yeah.
the future when you're like, where did this guy come from? Maybe we're watching that right now. Hey, where did this guy come from?
I think that's an interesting point, Judd. And I know that people in the building believe that about Tommy Rees. I would say other people in the coaching profession believe that about Tommy Rees. Nick Saban said glowing things about him when he was at Alabama. So I think you're right. The fact that he was a quarterback, the fact that he played at Notre Dame, worked for Nick Saban, his dad was a longtime personnel executive in the league, including with the Browns. I think all those things help shape a guy and put him on that track. And you saw it's not apples to apples, but Kevin Stefanski, his dad was an NBA executive. And so you're around professional sports all the time. You're not in awe of being around athletes, and you know how coaches deal with it. You just see the whole inner workings of professional sports. And I think that gives you a huge leg up from somebody coming from completely the outside. So I do think Rees is on that track. It being a coordinator at 32 obviously is a huge step in that direction. I think he tried. I thought it was interesting. We talked to him a handful of times throughout the course of the year, and they rotate the position coaches that talk. So we got him, let's say, every 4 or 5 weeks during the season. And we actually got him right before the finales the last time we talked to Tommy. And, those settings are a lot more casual. They're Friday mornings. There's maybe, a handful of media in there. And then yesterday was different. Bunch of cameras, pretty crowded media room. He goes sport coat as opposed to, a game week. It's coaching attire, sweatshirt or T-shirt, whatever. So I think there was a change in how he was presenting himself yesterday. It was, hey, I'm the coordinator. This is a big job. And I think that's, again, part of the progression to get to that head coaching role, like you mentioned.
And he's done a good job of learning how to avoid the question, because he did not want to talk about the quarterback and what their plans are there, other than to say they want an offense that can fit any quarterback.
Yeah, that maybe he learned that from his time with Kevin Stefanski or Nick Saban. It's interesting, Chud. Obviously, quarterback is the biggest issue of this offseason, and we're going to talk about it a billion times from now through free agency, through the draft, after the draft, like we always do. But it's just a huge question mark. We just don't know who's going to play quarterback for this team. They might have 3 new quarterbacks when the offseason program kicks off, or after the draft and the rookies join the veterans. So it's a huge unknown. He didn't give much insight, but I do think the way he talked about what he looks for in a quarterback is meaningful. And like you mentioned, fitting the offense to the quarterback. And, he said if he had to pick one quality of a quarterback, it would be a decision maker. He said quarterbacks make 60, 70, 80 decisions every game, and they have to be the right ones. So that's the number one thing he looks for. And I completely understand that. I'm a guy that loves a big arm, but a big arm is no good if you're making the wrong decisions and or if you're not accurate. So, we can at some point we probably have done this before, but rank the most important qualities of a quarterback. And he said decision making. So that's something to keep in mind as the Browns evaluate the quarterbacks, whether it's a veteran or in the draft. But then that point about having an offensive system that's flexible enough to adjust to whoever the quarterback is. I think that's really important, Chud, because I spent a lot of time advocating for the return to the Kevin Stefanski system, as we call it, the one he installed in 2020, the wide zone run scheme, play action passing, more of a pocket quarterback that doesn't have to move a ton, just has to be able to roll out with on those bootleg play actions. And while Tommy Rees said that there'll be core elements from that they use, which is important. So they're going to go back to that to some degree. He said, because I asked him, I said, you're not going to know your quarterback until March or maybe April. So how do you not have a solid system in place before you know who the quarterback is? And his point is, you have your system, but it has to be flexible enough. He used the word malleable enough that if you get this type of quarterback, he can fit in your system. And you adapt that system to best fit that guy. And I think some people get caught up in that and they say, hey, you have to have this identity and you have to have this system and you fit the player to the system. And Stefanski does not want to be like that. And he's been pretty adamant about that, or consistent about that, since he's gotten the job. And he's tried to bend to whether it's Baker Mayfield or Jacoby Brissett or Deshaun Watson or Joe Flacco. He's tried to bend the offense to who that quarterback is. And obviously, sometimes it hasn't worked, and a lot of that is because the quarterback, particularly Watson, hasn't played well enough to take advantage of whatever the system is. But I just think that's a key point from Tommy Rees's thing is because quarterbacks are different. Cam Ward is different than Shadir Sanders is different than Kirk Cousins. So when you get together in January and February and March as a staff, you put together this system. But then when you find out who that quarterback is going to be, then you pivot and you change parts of those systems, or you highlight parts of that system to benefit the quarterback. So I think people are going to have to remember that, not get stuck in, hey, maybe it doesn't look exactly like it did in 2020, or people think it should look, because they are really going to, and I trust them, I believe when they say this, they are going to be flexible given who that player is, especially at that quarterback position.
Okay, so quickly, Scott Petrak talking right now. You don't think they're locked into any certain system right now, like the 2023 year, 2020,
Right.
or last year, or whatever. You think it will evolve?
I do. I think there'll be core tenets. I think they want to go back to more run than they had last year, and I would say they probably won't be as spread as Ken Dorsey's system was a year ago. But if it's let's say it's Jalen Milroe, the guy from Alabama, right, that Tommy Rees worked with, he's more of a runner. He's not a finished product. So I think the evaluations could be shaped by the system. And you say, hey, this guy just can't run what we want. He can't run some of the basics that they want to do. And that could eliminate some guys. But let's say Cam Ward's available at number 2, and Cam Ward just isn't quite the guy that – he's not the prototypical guy you would want in the Stefanski system. I don't think that rules out Cam Ward, for example, right? So I think that's the kind of thing you have to keep in mind is if they feel this guy is a supreme talent, they're not going to just rule him out because he might not drop right into a Stefanski system.
Okay. So right now, from what you heard yesterday, anything you've heard behind the scenes, anything you've heard anywhere at all, and you can be quick on this.
Yeah.
Do we know who they're targeting at quarterback?
No. I mean,
No.
The names are out there. I mean, the guy who makes sense. Kirk Cousins makes sense. Russell Wilson, if he's available. Geno Smith, if he happened to get cut by Seattle. Does Daniel Jones get a look? Those type of guys in the free agent trade market. And then all the top draft quarterbacks, right? You drafted number 2, any of those guys are on the table.
Yeah, okay. I saw you had an article out there with possible free agents and guys in the league now. I just didn't know if maybe there was any kind of anything out there at all kind of leaning towards one guy in the draft.
No, because first of all, you don't know who Tennessee's going to take at number 1. And I know the Titans just hired a new GM. The quote from his press conference is getting a lot of traction is, you don't pass, I think he said, I'm paraphrasing, you don't pass on a generational talent. And a lot of people took that to mean Travis Hunter, the Colorado cornerback / receiver, two-way player, right? He won the Heisman Trophy because he's different than everybody else. Because he's a two-way guy, he's considered probably by many people the best talent in the league or in the draft, as opposed to a quarterback, because there's doubts about all the quarterbacks. So, maybe. So my point is, if you don't know who Tennessee's going to take, and maybe Tennessee doesn't even take a quarterback, then all those draft guys, you have to evaluate them. You have to consider them, and I think it's too early in the process for the Browns to tie themselves to one of those guys.
QB coach, are they going to bring one in?
It sounds like it. They interviewed Christian Jones. He is the assistant quarterback coach with the Giants. From my alma mater, played receiver at Northwestern, was a captain at Northwestern. Sounds like a really smart guy. So they, I mean, seriously, like if you look at his resume, he's got a master's and all kinds of things. So they interviewed him yesterday. Tommy Rees said they hadn't made the decision if they're going to hire a quarterback's coach. But if you're interviewing for the position, I would assume you'd hire somebody. It's such an important position. And Tommy Rees is, we talked about in his first year in the coordinator role in the NFL. You can take something off his plate and have someone on the staff who can really focus on that quarterback position. It just makes sense.
Yeah, sure. All right. Before we move on to Myles Garrett, anything else from Tommy Rees or what you saw yesterday?
Yeah, the only other piece of that flexibility system thing, I thought there was an interesting quote where he said, the system is our ID, our identity. Our identity is a system. And he wants it to be easy for his players to adjust. So you're going to have these core tenants, and the players are going to know it, and the system's the identity. But then where they're going to be flexible and different is how they go from week to week to make it look different for the defense, to confuse the defense. So they're trying to strike that balance of, okay, here's what we do, but here's how we're different on a week-to-week basis. It's we always hear about you have to change for the opponent you're playing. And so they want to have this reliable system foundation that they pull from and then tweak things on a week-to-week basis so it looks different from the defense, but in its essence, the offense is doing the same kind of things. And, who knows if they'll be able to execute that plan, but I thought he was able to kind of boil it down in a sentence that I thought made sense, is how they're trying to progress and be multiple while being rooted in something.
That's interesting. Okay. All right, let's get on to Garrett. He remains in contention to repeat as the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. Do you think he will?
I don't. 3-14 is just too hard to overcome, Judd. And I think it's that simple, right? He had 14 sacks a year ago and won it. He had 14 sacks this year. Didn't lead the league in either season in sacks, but he had so much other things many things going for him that it wasn't all about one statistic. And this year, he leads the league in tackles for loss. He's 22 tackles for loss, tops in the league. So you can point to a bunch of stats, right? He still gets double and triple teamed as much or nearly as much or more than anybody else in the league. So if you just looked at Myles Garrett in his performance from 2023 to 2024, you can say he was just as good. And Jim Schwartz, the coordinator, said that at the end of the year as they were kind of making the pitch for Garrett to repeat his DPOY. But 3-14, you just don't have – it's hard for voters to vote for you when your team is that bad. Last year, he was the best player on arguably the league's best defense, the league's top-ranked defense in a number of categories, and that went a long way for his candidacy. This year, the defense was just average. The team was terrible. So it's tough to get these voters from across the country to say, yeah, Myles Garrett's performance was so much better than anybody else that you have to give the award to him. So I think Petrak, the Broncos cornerback, is going to get the award. Trey Hendrickson's another finalist, TJ Watt from Pittsburgh, and then Eagles linebacker Zach Bond. Those are the other finalists. But I think it'll go Surtain. And Myles could be the runner-up, or it could go Surtain, Hendrickson, Garrett, which is still an enormous accomplishment for Garrett, even to be a finalist at 3-14, let alone, runner-up or third-place finisher.
Well, I guess that says something, though. I mean, to be able to be honored like you are on a defense and team that was that bad, though, anyway, right, Scott?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think Browns fans and we recognize how great Garrett has been. And I think the rest of the league does too, but this is another example of that.
Yeah. All right. I mean, that was quite a bit of Browns talk for a cold week in January with the, I mean, if you don't get that, presser yesterday in the Stefanski news, kind of not much going on. So that was nice anyway. As you had mentioned earlier, we don't have to keep asking about it, but now we could turn our attention to the NFL playoffs. And boy, oh my gosh, I am embarrassed, Scott. I don't even think I deserve to make picks this weekend. I know I will, and you will as well, but I don't deserve it. I don't remember ever having a playoff disaster quite like this. 1-3.
Oof.
Yeah, and I think you went 2-2, right?
Oh, I feel like I did. Well,
Because you took the Ravens, right?
Yeah, I lost the Ravens.
And you took
Man.
the Lions, right?
Yeah, but you know what? I took the points in that game, Chud, so I'm counting that as a win.
Well, I will say this. You did say that you've been worried about the Lions, and I thought about
Yeah.
that as that game was going on. You warned me, you warned the listeners, you were worried about the defense. That game I did not see coming. I didn't agree with you. I did not think that they could lose at home like that. I didn't give Washington enough credit. I knew Jaden Daniels was special, but I just did not think that was happening. So like I have no excuse for that. The Ravens Bills game, man, if Andrews catches that ball, we both might win that game and the Ravens. Not that we're rooting for him
Sure.
necessarily, but I mean that game could have gone either way, and it was in Buffalo. So I don't feel like that was as much of a miss. And then the Eagles Rams, that was me going out on a limb. And you know what? That got kind of tight at the end. I
It
don't,
did.
I don't put that in the same level as the Ravens Bills. Like, um, oh, the Rams should have won, because I could sit here and say, oh, the Ravens should have won because they really could have. The Rams though made it close, man, and I'm telling you, if it doesn't snow like it did, I mean all those turnovers. I'm telling you, I think the Rams could have won that game if they're playing in a different environment.
Well, I'm glad you said. I was just going to say the same thing. The snow had a huge effect on that game, and it makes me. We'll get to the Eagles game, but it makes me worry a little bit about the Eagles passing attack because they win anyway, but they're not throwing it for a ton of yards. They didn't need to. The weather was a little iffy, but they didn't really pull away from the Rams like I thought they could have. Turnovers are huge in that game. Turnovers are huge in all of them. I mean, you mentioned the Andrews drop, and he had a couple. He had at least one other big drop, but Lamar turns it over
Yeah,
3 times, right? At least
true.
twice. And then the Lions game, Jared Goff kept turning it over. So,
Yeah,
and I know coaches talk about it all the time, and it kind of starts to ring hollow. But those those turn games, and when you're talking about picking games and having a vested interest, whether it's just we pick them or people bet on these games, that's it's such an equalizer. And I find myself at the end of those games saying, "Well, yeah, I don't feel like an idiot picking the Ravens because X, Y, and Z go the other way and they win that game." And I think say that for you can say that for a ton of games, right? But there's some that just turnovers aren't a factor. One team's better than the other team. But I thought all three of the games that we're talking about, turnovers swung things significantly. Not that the Lions were ever going to stop the Commanders, but they might have been able to outscore them if Goff doesn't keep turning it over. So that's something that you can't. I don't think you necessarily can predict that ahead of time. Lamar was great protecting the ball all season long, and then he doesn't in this game. So, I don't know if you can predict it as we talk about these conference championship games, but you have to know in the back of your mind that that could wind up being the greatest factor, and you don't know about it going in.
yeah, true story. And I guess Lamar still has to deal with not getting it done in the clutch, huh?
It's such an interesting discussion, Chud, because I thought he played turnovers aside, and maybe you can't put the turnovers to the side. I thought he played phenomenal, and he bounced back from those early turnovers to give the Ravens a chance to win late, or at least a chance to be tied late. And Mark Andrews drops the 2-point conversion, obviously. So you can look at it like Lamar didn't get over the hump because he didn't, and he made plays that were extremely costly. I thought he overcame it. I thought he played well enough to win that game. So I don't look at that performance as a knock on Lamar. I think that's the next step in him, I would say, eventually getting to a Super Bowl because he's that good a quarterback.
Yeah. And then we were both right on the money with the Chiefs. So again, 2-2 for you, 1-3 for me. You're 6-4 in the playoffs. I'm 5-5. Yeah, kind of embarrassing, but yeah, that's the way it goes. I just again did not see the Lions coming, so credit to you for that. And like you said, you took the point. So there you have it. All right. You ready to move on to this week?
Yeah, looking forward.
Man, we only have 3 more games to predict. You said it a couple weeks ago, like, you're down to there's not that many games left. Here we are. We only have 3 games.
I know.
And just one day this week was Sunday. So, by the way, before we get to that, how about the Buckeyes, man? I mean, what a way to come back and win it all. And, it's funny. I remember we talked about this and, Scott, if the playoff format is not the way it is, I mean, Ryan Day could have been fired and they don't make the playoffs if it's an old system. And you never know that what happened could have happened because of that loss to Michigan. But, we talked about this before. I think just you got to take a little bit off of this Michigan game. It doesn't mean as much. And I know that sounds crazy to say, but if you lose to Michigan and win national championship, who cares?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's 2 bottom lines, and or 2 huge takeaways. That's number 1, is the priority has to shift. And I think it has, and I think it definitely should. And this should be Exhibit A, is the national championship's more important than the Michigan game. That doesn't mean the Michigan game's not important at all, but it can't be the end-all, be-all, and it can't be what every decision is based upon. And that's great. The timing is perfect for Ryan Day because you're right. He might have been fired, Chud, and who knows? And if he wouldn't have been fired, the pressure on him would have been so immense heading into next season. And he's talked about how his family, his kid couldn't do anything besides go to school. They were getting, killed and not killed isn't not the right word, but it was really difficult for them to be in public and social media and everything. The focus and the scrutiny and all that on Ryan Day from a negative standpoint was so intense after that Michigan loss that I don't know if he would have kept his job. And the second big takeaway is sometimes you have to be patient. Sometimes you have to recognize that you do have the right coach, and maybe it doesn't look like that at the time. And maybe it doesn't appease everyone, but you can still have the right guy. And, maybe Ohio State fans would argue with me that he's not the right guy if he can't beat Michigan. But I think we saw differently. I think the national championship proves otherwise, especially given his track record of winning games and recruiting the way he recruits. It's just this one 4-year hiccup against Michigan, and it's a huge hiccup, and I get it. But if you take a step back and you look at the entire resume and the entire scope of what Ryan Day has been able to do, I think that should overwhelm the losses to Michigan.
Well, he completely flipped the resume because, he had a ton of wins, but a lot of coaches could have a ton of wins in the Big Ten against some of those teams like they do. His resume was showing, losses to Michigan and losses in big games. And he completely flipped it by winning a gauntlet of games in this postseason that is new to the world. And he completely flipped the script.
That's fair. But I guess my question would be, is he a better coach now than he was 2 months ago when they lost to Michigan? Has he fundamentally changed it all? Or did he just get another opportunity to prove himself?
Well, I still think Howard, I think he was banged up in that game. Something was weird in that game. And, I know there's conspiracy theories out there that, hey, they didn't have to then play the Big Ten game, the Big Ten championship, and face Oregon for 3 times. You've heard that. I think we talked about that, which I don't buy at all. But
no, I'm not buying that one.
I don't buy it at all. But still, yeah. Well, anyway, congrats to the Buckeyes.
No doubt. And I will say that, I think we saw it. I think it was a little microcosm with, they were so conservative against Michigan and tried to run it and then throw it to their best guys, their best skill players on the outside, and kept banging their head against the wall up, trying to run up the middle. And then they played Tennessee and they opened it up and scored a ton of points early and looked like, oh my gosh, this is the Ohio State offense everyone envisioned. And then at the end of that Notre Dame game, got tight again. And I get it. You're trying to hang on to this win. You're up. But after that fumble, Notre Dame makes a little rally. They get tight. And when they ran Howard up the middle on those first and second down before the 3rd and 11 to Smith, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how can you get this conservative when you need a couple first downs? Running up the middle with your quarterback's likely not going to do it for you. And you can almost see Ryan Day on the headset yelling at Chip Kelly, "Hey, we got to throw the ball here. Like, let's make a play." And then they go and get the single coverage and make the play of the game or the play of the season. And it felt like they were able to get themselves out of that conservative trend, and they did it coming out after the Michigan loss, and they did it as that Notre Dame national championship was starting to slip away.
Yeah, that's a great call right there. All right, ready to get to this weekend?
Yep.
All right, let's go with the first game. Eagles at home, favored by 6, unless that's changed in the last hour. Eagles by 6 over Washington. Do you want to go first or second on this one? You got the Eagles 14-3, Washington 12-5. 3:00 start. Washington hasn't been in this position in forever. The Eagles obviously have. Yeah. You want to go first or second?
Yeah. Let me go first on this one.
All right.
I picked the Eagles to go to the Super Bowl, so I'm going to pick them to win this game. I think that's a big spread. 6 points feels big to me, Chud, especially with all the love Jaden Daniels is getting, and deservedly so, all of it. Looks so calm, doesn't turn the ball over, makes plays with his arm, with his legs. Great decision maker, which we talked about earlier, how important that is. The line feels a little big to me. It's 6. Having said that, I think the Eagles are a better team. I think the Eagles they might have the best roster in the league. And you see that from their defensive front. You see it with their offensive line. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. They've done it all year. Saquon's had an unbelievable year. They have the Hurts element in the run game, assuming he's healthy, and it sounds like that knee that he banged up in the last game is going to be good enough that he can move around and do what he needs to do. The Eagles, if they fall behind, concerns me, because then you got to throw it, and they haven't been explosive throwing it, even though they have legitimate weapons on the outside. So I'm going to take the Eagles to win the game. If you're talking about are they going to cover or not, I think I'd pick them to cover. I don't feel great about that. I think Philly's going to be able to score some, but I just think the Eagles' defense is better than the defenses that Washington has faced, especially the Lions. It's in Philly. I know how great Daniels has been, but there's reasons rookie quarterbacks don't go to the Super Bowl, have never gone to the Super Bowl. Maybe he's due to throw an interception. I just think this sets up for the Eagles. I'm going to take the Eagles.
All right, so you're going Eagles, and that was your pick, so you're sticking with it. You know, looking at that line, it almost makes you think it's a trap, like, oh, of course, and then the Eagles go win by 10, right?
Yep,
so
yep.
I can see where that's a trap. Scott, I'm going Washington.
Woo.
I'm going opposite you because I just feel like in my mind, I feel like the Eagles are going to blow it at some point, and I'm going to give them one more chance to blow it here. I, again, think that if it weren't for the weather, they could have lost to the Rams. I don't know how the weather is going to be this week. I haven't looked. I'm not sure what that will play into it. Now, I do agree with you on one end. Saquon Barkley could take the game over with that running attack. And, I mean, listen, I'm not saying the Eagles aren't good. I know they're a very good, if not great team. And Saquon could literally, put the team on his back, and I'll look foolish here. But I'm going to go with Jaden Daniels, and I'm going to say that this guy finds a way to get it done. And the storybook season continues for Washington. And I just am going to go out on a limb here and pick Washington to get in the Super Bowl. I don't know if I'd put a lot of money on it, but I'm going Commanders. Commanders in the bowl.
Wow. Strong pick, Chud. And I could see it. We would see nothing but Jaden Daniels for 2 weeks if they get to the Super Bowl, because it'd be such a crazy story. I mean, talk about a turnaround for the franchise. First year coach, he's been a head coach before, but first year in Washington with Dan Quinn. New owner, the Dan Snyder era is gone. Talk about turning the page. It would be a heck of a story. And I just did a quick look. It looks like the weather's going to be fine in both cities for Sunday.
Okay. All right, AFC, I'll go first. Chiefs, as last time I checked, -2 hosting the Bills. I think a lot of people, I've talked to some people, and I've seen a lot of people are going Bills, Eagles. Like, I think Bills, Eagles might be a favorite. Like people think Josh Allen, this is his time. They're tired of the Chiefs, this and that. I can't do it. I'm going Chiefs. I picked them at the beginning of the year to go to the Super Bowl, and in my mind, pretty much figured they would three-peat. It's never been done before. I know a lot of people can't stand Mahomes and the Chiefs, but I actually think it's kind of, I don't know. I mean, I do like the Bills, though. I mean, I don't hate the Bills. I think the Bills are a close resemblance to Cleveland. The cities are similar, and it's easy to latch onto the Bills and root for them. And typically, I don't root for the Yankees and those type of storylines, which Kansas City is, like the dynasties. As I've gotten older, though, I've come to appreciate the dynasties. I think it would be kind of cool to see history and maybe a team win 3 in a row since it's never been done. I don't hate Mahomes. I enjoy watching him play. That said, it's fun to watch Josh Allen, so this should be a fun game to watch. And when I give this commentary, I try to take my Browns hat off, because when I was younger, I would always form my opinions based on my hatred for teams, and I had the Browns lens on, right? So I'm trying to do this with the lens off and just say that I think this is a great matchup between these two quarterbacks. It's going to be fun, but I'm going with my preseason prediction. I'm going with Mahomes. I think he's, like I said, I get the whole, the penalties and people are annoyed by that. I think it's going to be a close one. Home field advantage, I think, does matter in this game more than it does in the NFC game. So I'm going Chiefs Commanders in my Super Bowl.
Very interesting, Chud. Very interesting. I'm glad you said what you said about the Chiefs and the three-peat and being the Yankees and that kind of thing, because I keep getting the sense that people are sick of them being there. And
absolutely
right. I personally don't have that. I think, Andy Reid is, I think, extremely likable. I think Kelsey's likable. I think Mahomes is likable. I don't really see a whole lot of reasons to just root against the Chiefs, except that they've won a lot of games and they've won the last 2 Super Bowls. And maybe that's enough. And for some people, you can root for whoever you want. But it feels different to me than the Patriots. They were winning. There was the cheating allegations or the cheating scandals. Belichick was unlikable. You could feel whatever way you wanted to about Brady. I just don't have those same feelings for the Chiefs. I think they're a likable team to root for. Midwest team, what have you. So I find it interesting that there are people that are just exhausted by them and want a new face. I think that's an interesting discussion. As far as the game, I'm taking the Chiefs. I've had the Chiefs going to the Super Bowl before the season. It's going to be a great story is if they try to go for a three-peat, just trying to get back to the Super Bowl again. They have been so dominant. I think they're a better overall team than the Bills. I think their defense is better than Buffalo's defense. Offensively, I think Buffalo has the advantage. Josh Allen's playing at a crazy MVP level. They're able to run the ball. He's able to throw the ball, even though, he's kind of just got a bunch of dudes at receiver. Amari Cooper had no impact in that last game, which was startling because I thought he was going to be great for Allen once the trade was made, from Cleveland. But their offense is really good. Allen is a runner, is a huge threat. So I think Buffalo has an edge on offense, but I think Kansas City has the edge on defense. And I think Mahomes neutralizes the Buffalo edge on offense to the point that Kansas City wins a close game. But I think in order for Kansas City to win, it's going to have to be a game in the 20s. If this starts to get to where Buffalo's scoring in the 30s, I'm not sure Kansas City I know I'm saying it about Patrick Mahomes-led offense. I don't know if Kansas City can keep up and score that many points. So I think the Kansas City defense is going to be huge in this game, but I think it comes through enough. I think Mahomes makes the big plays that he always makes, and Buffalo is denied yet again. I got Kansas City. It's a close one, but the spread's so close that I don't think it matters. I got Kansas City and Philly in the Super Bowl.
And that was your prediction at the beginning of the year. Nicely done.
I know. How about that? Let's see if it happens.
Yeah, let's see if it happens. All right. Well, that's it for me, Scott. I got to go get a nap in, my friend, as we head into the weekend.
Sounds good, buddy. I appreciate this. We'll see. We got a 2-week wait before the Super Bowl. We'll see if we get any Browns news next week, or if I give you a break and then we hit up a big one pre-Super Bowl. We'll see what happens with the Browns and the NFL next week. But I appreciate it as always, Chud. Thanks everybody for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.